Hey, everybody. Welcome aboard the Blue Heart webcast podcast. It's very confusing. I shouldn't have done that, right? The webcast, because it's here on YouTube, so we can see it. But it's also on all kinds of platforms where you can get audio, right? I can put these out on audio as well. So one of the things I want to take a couple minutes to talk about is an important topic for all of us as law enforcement officers, and that's forensic evidence, right? If you're a patrol officer, you say to yourself, what do I care about forensic evidence? I'm not a detective. I'm not a forensics officer, just a patrol officer. And what do I care? Well, you should care a lot, because one of the realities is that when you go to a crime scene, any kind of a crime scene, you as the patrol officer are usually the first person there. So your examination of the crime scene is very important. I did another program on crime scene. You should go back and look at it. But the reality is I want to really focus in for a couple of minutes here on fingerprints. And there's some basic things you need to know about fingerprints. So we're going to look at a picture in a minute. It's going to show you some fairly common kind of fingerprints. But when you think about it, when you get to that crime scene, you're probably going to meet with the victim, unless the neighbor called something in. I saw somebody suspicious, and it was a guy in the backyard. I heard glass break, and a guy took off. So you might get there. There may or may not be a victim on scene. In this case, let's say that there is. You get there and it's a burglary. It's a simple one. We go to a lot of burglaries, don't we? And the homeowner tells you, I left at 9 o'clock this morning. I came back at 10:30. My back door is kicked in. Up in my bedroom, there's jewelry missing. We had some cash, and that's missing. And one of the pillowcases is missing out of our bedroom. Now, this is very, very common. When people commit a burglary, they don't always go prepared. Burglaries are very often committed in the spur of the moment. Somebody's walking around, they see an empty house, and they knock on the door. Nobody answers. They go around the back, and they find their way in the house, and they steal stuff. So when you're doing a burglary investigation, you want to make sure you canvass the area, right? This is a very important skill to have as a patrol officer. Detectives are going to come out and do what detectives do. They're going to process the scene and all that. But once you get done doing what you're doing, you talk to the homeowner, then you're going to go look and see if you can figure out where they got in. Okay, it's at the back door. But canvassing, you might find out by talking to a couple of neighbors down the road that, did you see anything strange? Did anybody strange show up at your house? And they went, well, I don't know. Some guy knocked at my door and said he was looking for Bill Rogers, but Bill Rogers don't live here. Oh, okay, because very often people will do that. If the house looks empty, if it looks like maybe it's a possibility they can commit a crime there, they'll go up and knock on the door often. Now, a person answers the door. So, now there's a person here. They ask for something stupid. Hey, I'm looking for Bill Rogers. He live here? No, Bill Rogers doesn't live here. Oh, your house number is 328. I was looking for 832. Sorry, I got the wrong thing wrong. And they leave. 99% of the time, that homeowner does not call the police station and say, hey, some strange guy just knocked at my door. They just take it as kid was confused, came to the wrong house. Okay, no big deal. But we know our burglars will often knock at the door, go around the back if nobody answers, and then find their way in. So by canvassing the area and talking to neighbors, you might get a suspect description, right? A vehicle description, all kinds of things. So let's get back to the house now. Let's start talking about the fingerprints. So when we look, the door might be kicked in. It might be pried. The glass might be broken. Maybe they went through a window, a basement window, wherever they went. You want to take a look at your crime scene and look at your windows and doors. Are there smudging on the door? Sometimes they might have tried the door first before they kicked it or booted it or pried it or whatever. So you might see some smudging on a window. I went to a burglary one time. It was a ranch house converted to a business, and it was a real estate office. And the burglar had walked up to a window in one of the rooms and put his hands on the glass, tried to open the window by sliding it up. Well, the window was locked from the inside. He didn't know that. And his fingers slid up and stopped at the brim of the window, but he left 10 perfect latent fingerprints right there. So you want to look at all the windows to make sure maybe they tried to get in. Now, I couldn't define the prints and stuff by looking at it, but I knew these were prints. And when I processed them, I knew there would be some fingerprints there that potentially could be a suspect. Now, it could have been a guy working on the window and he just slid his hand, but you're going to find that out in your investigation. So before we go any further, I want to thank our sponsors. All right, Blue360media.com is my publisher, and there's a couple of my books, The Interview and The Investigation. You want to go check them out. They're great learning books, and they're inexpensive. So you might want to go check that out. Also, medicalessentialdiagnostics.com is a company in New Jersey only right now, where anyone who has a public sector job, state, county, local, federal in New Jersey, can go to Medical Essential Diagnostics and they can get a complete health workup at no cost to them. They take whatever insurance you have or your spouse has or whatever, and there's no copay, there's nothing. But you find out something's wrong with you and you get it taken care of, or you find out you're good. All right, so Medical Essential Diagnostics and Blue360 Media. Also, there's a company out there called Latent or Smart Tint, same company. They make the safety glazing for windows. Great stuff. As far as, trying to secure a school or a building or a church, if you do those kind of things for your agency, you want to understand. And I got to tell you, Latent or Smart Tint, Dan Singer, excellent company, quality work, and it's shockingly inexpensive for the protection that it gives you, right? So those are our sponsors. All right, so a couple of basics on fingerprints. Finding where they're left. So the idea is there's different words that you should be aware of as a patrol officer. That's going to be important in your report. First of all, I said before, we process the prints. Right? That's the proper term to use in your reports and to use when you testify. In slang, we all say, oh, we dusted for prints. And while we are sometimes throwing dust on the prints, it's fingerprint powder. It's really what it is. You shouldn't call it dust. It's not dust. It's powder. It's a volcanic ash that they use in a lot of them. And then there's colored ones and all kinds. There's metal. So there's metallic. So there's lots of different materials. So you want to sound professional in your report. And if you get up on the stand and an attorney reads that you said, yeah, you dusted the fingerprints and this and that, they're going to ask you about dusting and they're going to ask you about terms to make you look bad. That's their job, make you look bad, look incompetent in front of the jury. So we say processed. So you might be a patrol officer that is actually going to go out and process the scene. In some agencies, you don't have 15 detectives running around. You might be the patrol officer / detective, and you're going to go in and process that scene. So you want to examine all your doors and windows first to look for smudging. If it's a car burglary, right? Very important, and you want to check with your prosecutor's office. A lot of times we can find fingerprints, latent fingerprints, on the outside of a car, and they very well might be the suspect. But the prosecutor's office is not going to prosecute on fingerprints you found outside the car, because somebody could have an easy, I was walking by and I touched the car. I thought it was a nice looking car, so I looked inside. That's why my fingerprints are on the window. So that's usually difficult to prosecute. So you want to get prints from inside the car. You want to make sure you go inside the vehicle and you get your prints in there. So the words, I want to continue on the words. I have said a couple times now, latent fingerprints, right? We use that term. Latent means unseen, right? So you might see a smudge, but you're not seeing the full fingerprint. So all the things on your fingerprints are called minutia. It seems very difficult when you first start looking at it, but once you get good at this and you learn about this, you can start pick things out. You can name a suspect if you have a good comparison set and by you looking at those that minutia on the fingerprint, the crime scene fingerprint and the known fingerprint of a suspect. You can make a match and you sign people up. And it's an amazing thing when you learn the technique that you can look at two prints and go, this is my crime scene print, and I'm comparing it to the known print of the suspect. And you could say, that's who that crime scene print came from. And you go lock them up. It's amazing. It's great. All right, so the word latent means unseen. So when we get there and we see smudging or we see some movement on the glass or whatever, we say we have a latent print. Now, an individual, whether it's you or detective, comes out, will then process the latent prints using different powders and different chemicals and things to try and develop the fingerprint minutia so that it can be photographed and then it can be lifted, right? And we can use that for identification, sending it to AFIS, the automatic fingerprint identification system, which is amazing when you get a call, hey, we got a match for one of your things. So there's a lot to cover here with fingerprints. When I show you this picture in a minute, I'm going to tell you. So some of the words. So we have latent, which means unseen, right? You can see something's there, but you can't tell what it is. Then you have patent, P-A-T-E-N-T. Patent means, oh, it's right in front of me. I can see it. So this might be a bloody fingerprint. Somebody's got blood on their hand. They touched the wall going out. And you could see all the lines of minutia. You could see all those, all the ridging and everything on their fingers. And they left it on the wall, or they left it on a table, or maybe they touched some kind of some caulking in the window. And you look and you can actually see all the points of minutia. That's patent. That's right in front of you. So you have latent and you have patent. So you want to use the right words. Okay. Now I'm going to see if I can pop this picture up real quick. Let's see what we have here. Let's see if I can get this to come up for us. All right. So what you're looking at here is 3 different kinds of fingerprints. Now you look at them and you say, wow, you know, they all kind of look like a lot of crazy lines. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. But if you look at your own fingerprints, right? Turn the light on, turn a bright light on, and look at your own fingerprints. You will see a loop or a whirl. Now, that's not a great picture of an arch. I don't care for that one very much. I have a better one I should have used. Sorry about that. An arch looks just like that. It's an arch, goes up to a point almost. And what's important about that is people with arched fingerprints, and a tented arch is a real sharp up and down of the fingerprint. Only 10% of the people in the world have that. So, you know, if you got tented arches in your latent prints that you develop, you're cutting down a lot of people out, right? So when you start talking to suspects and they have loops and whirls, you know that's not your suspect. All right, so when you look at these things, you say, man, how could you ever read that? Look at all of that nonsense, all them lines. Well, each one of them lines has a meaning. So if you look at the very center, all right, let's look at the middle one in the whirl. All right, let's look at the whirl right there. And if you see the very center, that's called the core. Right? And you see that's where it starts. It's the core of the fingerprint. Now, if you look to the right and start to go down, you'll see what looks like a little triangle. That's called a delta. Right? So what we do to identify these things is that when you look at all those little lines, you see that they come to an end. Sometimes they split. Sometimes they just are sitting there all by themselves. If you look at the loop on the left, you'll see how that core is. And you can see that that loop comes down and loops up and around. And then you see a tiny little line all by itself. So that's called an island, right? So when a fingerprint splits in half, that's called a bifurcation. Right? A bifurcation. It splits into 2. So what we do is we count from the core down to an identifiable piece of minutia, right? So if I look at the whirl in the middle and I say, okay, I go from the center, go down, it looks to me like a bifurcation is down there about, let's see, if we go from the very center, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 or 12 down. My eyes are, you know, I need my glasses to see perfect, but it looks pretty good. I see a bifurcation. I'm going to count 11 lines down and I'm going to mark that somehow. I'm going to mark that on my diagram or something. I have 1 point of minutia. Then you're going to look for another point. So say, where's another bifurcation? Look to the right. Oh, there's one from the center. Go to the right and down. You got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. There's another. So you start to add these things up. And as you start to recognize ridge endings, that's where a ridge just stops and it's just kind of sitting there. An island, all kinds of things. When we start to see these different things in a fingerprint, that's what we're counting up, right? And in America, we don't have a lot of restrictions on when an officer can make a determination. So you got to be certified to read these fingerprints, right? You're an examiner, you're a fingerprint examiner. You get certified in that. I actually teach that. We're going to be teaching that course, and anybody can learn how to do it. It's a little complicated. You got to pay attention, but once you get it, what a great skill to have. You can look at it, and you can now make identifications of suspects. So when we identify them in America, if I am the officer investigating the case, and my suspect is John Jones, and I have a crime scene print that has, I can only get 6 points of identification. I can only find 6. It's kind of a messed up fingerprint, but I can get 6 good ones that I can count on. And I look at a known set of my suspect's fingerprints, and you get that from a previous arrest. So you find out he was arrested in the town next to you, you get a set of those arrest prints, and that's what you're going to compare it to. Or maybe he's arrested in your PD. You go to the file and you pull it out. Now you compare it. If you are confident that those 7 that you matched is your guy, then you could certainly sign a complaint. You can go sign a criminal complaint. The problem is you need to understand the numbers. You know, how many points of minutia can people have in common, as opposed to being that's only person that can be is John Smith? Well, if you got like 4 points of minutia, that can be 100 million people. So we got 300 million people. It could be 3 people that did that. So as the number goes up, when you get to like 8, 9, or 10 points of identification, that is in the billions. So there were 7 billion people on the planet. And if we can get this up to the point when it's up to 20 billion, like say you get 14 points of identification, you can be pretty confident this is your person, right? Because that's more than all the people in the world. The problem that officers have if they're not sure and they sign a complaint with not enough points of minutia, and then your suspect comes to court and has a rock solid alibi. I was in Portland, Oregon on that day. I was not in that town doing a break-in. Then you can be called into question and you could lose and you look bad. In England, United Kingdom, I believe they require 17 points of ID before the officers can sign a complaint, right? Now that may have changed in the last couple of years, but that's what it used to be. 17, you know how many points that is? That's more than 100 billion people. You know, obviously this is your guy. Now, over the course of time, what we find is that these fingerprints are very, very valuable to you, right? So learning how to take a fingerprint, how to lift it and dust it is going to be important. So I think we're going to do another program in the future on this, and I'll show you some of these techniques because a lot of patrol officers do have to do this themselves. All right. So remember, go get my books, blue360media.com, Medical Essential Diagnostics, and SmartTint. They help us bring all of this together. We'll talk to you soon.